Despite not being great over the past 10 to 15 years, Milan is one of the greatest, one of the biggest clubs of all time, a legendary club. With 7 Champions League trophies, 19 Serie A Scudettos, and multiple legends such as Baresi, Van Basten, Nesta, Pirlo, Kaká, Seedorf, Gattuso, and many others. I could talk about this all day. So could an American become a Milan legend? Can Christian Pulisic join this legends list over the long term? As crazy as this sounds, times have changed for Milan, and maybe, just maybe, this might not be crazy talk. So before you get mad at me and call me delusional, hear me out. Hello. If you are new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. In today's episode, we will be discussing, can Christian Pulisic eventually, he's still far, but eventually become a Milan legend? And for this topic, I decided to bring 2 guys that are experts on Italian soccer. They're like the master Yodas of Serie A, except for they're not little or they're not green. They're also not old. The only thing they have in common with Yoda is that they are real, just like Master Yoda once was when he was alive. And the guests are Marco Messina from Italian Football TV on YouTube and a Serie A expert on CBS Paramount Plus. The other guest is Martino Puccio, that does content for Sempre Milan and is one of the hosts of the Milan podcast. He also does his own coverage on YouTube and X. I'm gonna put all their links and handles in the description of this video. And throughout the video, we are going to try to determine, how does one become a Milan legend? What does he have to accomplish? We're going to go through a few names, project what Pulisic can do for Milan and what he has already done, and try to draw a conclusion by the end of it. And maybe the 2 guests, or one of them, will disagree with me. Now, before we start, make sure to drop a like in this video if you haven't already. It helps the channel quite a bit, and I thank you very much for that. And let us know in the comment section down below. From 1 to 10, or actually from 1 to 100%, what's the percentage that you would give the odds that Christian Pulisic could become a Milan legend if he stays there long enough and performs, of course? All right, with that said, let's begin the episode. Okay, everyone, today we're going to talk about a topic that, I don't know, man, it sounds a bit crazy. So for that reason, I decided to bring 2 guys that know the Serie A very well, and then obviously myself, very much a casual of the Serie A. I've been following it for like 20 plus years at this point, but I'm definitely not one of those that knows as much as you guys. You both kind of cover it for a living at this point. So first and foremost, welcome both of you. Marco, so back to the channel, and Martino, back here at the channel. I'm very thankful to have both of you here today. Who wants to go first?
Yeah. Marco can go
Martino,
first.
Vai. You gotta go first.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Love getting to chat some American and Italian footy at the same time. Very niche market, so it's exciting to also talk to someone else that has the similar interests as Marco, who I've known for a while now. So yeah, it's great to chat.
Marco?
Yeah, happy to be back. I like that our worlds are starting to blend together. I'm seeing so many people watch the Serie A, and Pulisic has been a really fun gateway to bridge this gap. So happy to be back on your channel.
This is wonderful, and it's been over a season with Pulisic in Milan. Before we even start this discussion of whether or not he can become Milan legend, I'm going to bring up a few things of like, what factors do we look into when we determine if a player is a legend or not? Because I went into the AC Milan website and I saw some names that I was like, I don't think he should be there, but I want to get your take on that. I'll ask Martino first, because you 2 are gentlemen. So if I don't point out to a name, you guys are just going to keep passing the
better off.
Good call.
Yeah, it's like Andrea Pirlo, just passing the ball, keeping the flow going. But were you surprised with the first 18 months of Pulisic with Milan? Because it's been really, really good. And he was coming off, I would say, like 2 poor seasons or seasons where he struggled with Chelsea, a much smaller club than Milan, I must say. But were you surprised, Martino?
Yeah, I think the major question for him coming in was strictly health, and the way Milan have really handled the injuries, and quite a few Italian teams. I know Marco's side, Juve, also have an injury crisis almost every year now. But we were very concerned with that because we can't keep players healthy, and this player who's had struggles staying that way was a big question mark for me. But I never also expected this level of production out of position. We knew that if we had someone opposite of Rafael Leao, they would have been able to create a lot more and have the ability to finish, because all that attention is on Milan's left side with Teo when Teo plays well. But yeah, it was seamless though. Like the second that he was playing, I think he scored a banger against Bologna on the opening match day of last season. And then he really just stayed at that level of consistency. As we know, like some people were like, he's not stepping up in the big games and all this. And he's obviously put that to bed so far this season. But he's exceeded expectations, and it really only took I want to call it a dirty foul, but a rough foul for him to finally miss some time.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that the main concern was health, because I was told by the Brits that he just sucked. That's what they would say. But again, they're not known for knowing much of their own sport. Marco, did it surprise you?
The little subtle shots that you keep throwing in are so funny.
Well, you have no idea how much I dealt with them over the years, like with Leeds, with Chelsea too. They are nuts at times. I very much love their passion. They're very passionate for the game, and I have a lot of English friends here in Florida, because a lot of them moved to Central Florida to escape the bad weather. Right? That's not even a joke. It's what they tell me.
Yeah.
And we have rough discussions with them, but it's all friendly. It's all friendly. Marco, did it surprise you? Was your concern the same? Just injuries? Or did you also doubt, would he play at the Milan level after the struggles with Chelsea? Even though, I mean, we know how that went.
I was a little scared. I'm not going to lie. Definitely the injury concerns I thought would be something that could keep lingering on for quite some time. But then I thought, you're coming at this Milan side who did have really good quality of layout. And I said, that's his position. How's he going to do on the opposite side? And with all these other players in the attack, which I think Martino brings up a great point that people never talked about for a while, which was that Leao was really the only one who could beat his man on Milan. And now you add this other piece to the table, and he blew all my expectations out of the water, Pulisic. And I remember going on a couple of Milan channels. I remember going on Milan TV, like an Italian channel in Italy, and sitting here, and they're like, all right, but for real, what are we going to do with the player? Like, it's more, he's American. That's going to be really good for us. You're going to get exposure. And I was like, you might be surprised with the quality that he has if he could stay fit. So that was sort of the narrative going in, which I can understand. They were probably just looking at what he had just recently done with Chelsea and said, we have an American ownership. Is this the only reason? And I think that actually lent itself to be something really good for Christian, because then once he started performing in the way that he did, nobody could doubt the quality and what he put onto the pitch. And then once you start doing it in those big games and you score it in the derby and in Champions League matches, you're always involved. And you think about where Milan would be this season without Christian, you got to give him credit and say that he's been the most important player for me, for Milan this season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's very different from the standard American player profile, right? He's not really the player that's like, he works hard, but he's not really reliant on that. He's not there to grind out the play. He's actually very technical, very fluid, creative at times too, even playing as a 10 for Milan. I think Milan has an issue with like not having a proper 10, but out of the players they have, Pulisic might be the most creative right now, outside of Rafael Leao in 1v1 situations, right? I mean, creative of like playing with his teammates. But let's go to the main topic of this video. Can Christian Pulisic become a Milan legend? And I know this might drive some people insane in Europe or in Italy, of like an American becoming a legend for arguably one of the most legendary clubs of all time at this point. I know a lot of the young fans are like, Milan? Well, I mean, they might not realize how big this team is, what they've accomplished. They've been going through a rough, like a little bit over a decade, I would say at this point, but this is a huge club, one of the biggest clubs in history. I would argue bigger than any English club these days, even though they're the most hyped ones now. But could he become a legend? I think before we do that, I want to bring up the Milan website, because they do have a legends page. So I want to go through just a few names that I've seen. Obviously, some of them you look at it, you're like, this guy has to be there. And then after we look at some of these names, I want to go through with you guys, what determines if a player is a legend or not? I know some of it can be subjective, sort of, but some of them are crystal clear, right? So you're looking at a few names here, at least one that I watched, Costa Curta and Alessandro Nesta. I think that's pretty obvious, right? Andrea Pirlo. A few players here I might not really know who they are, and you guys feel free to jump in, like the black and white ones. You guys feel free to jump in. We see Carlo Ancelotti there for Milan. Maldini, this is, I believe, is the father, right? Maldini, correct. There's also the son. Clarence Seedorf, obviously. But then I get to one name that was kind of sketchy to me, David Beckham.
See
Right?
when they do that, that's strictly money, bro. I mean,
This
we
is
got him
the
on
Milan
loan.
website, guys. This is the
I mean,
Milan website.
again, this is just when you talk about Milan being really poor for like 15 plus years. I think you were being conservative on how long it's been. But as Marco would know too, like during the rise of social media and how everything has grown in terms of the sport, Milan could not have been worse at that time. So historically, a lot of people, like you were saying, in younger generations don't actually know some of this stuff. So it's harder for people to kind of connect like big names and legends with the club. I assume there's going to be Ronaldinho here at this point if David Beckham is there.
Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there.
So Beckham being here, I mean, that's just I think.
Yeah, but
no,
but I thought even Beckham, like big name, obviously legend of English football, but David Beckham, I don't think he played a full season for Milan. It was like these small loans.
he was getting on loan, yeah, because he wanted to return to Europe and all that. But like that,
I don't think you could meet any Milan fan. Like any Milan fan would put Beckham in that list. Like just real people, not like on the website or anything like that. In real life, if you ask anybody, I don't think that he would be there. Legend of the game, obviously iconic, larger than life, larger than even the sport at times. I get that, but Milan fans would probably not put Beckham in this list. The rest look good though. I mean, the other names are all ones that Martino grew up watching and hearing about, and were passed down from generation to generation. Kaká is one of my favorite. He was almost the reason why I became a Milan fan. That's how much I loved Ricardo Kaká. So
do they not have Van Basten?
He's the one that sticks out.
They don't have Van Basten listed, or these
no,
are all
Van Basten. We're getting there. We're getting there. With
okay.
So Pato is there for some reason. I'm assuming that's another pushback, right?
I think that's like probably
a big impact.
Yeah, it's
big impact for a lot of fans.
It's one of the bigger what ifs in club history because
he
dated
the daughter too. So
than Messi did. He was incredible before, as you know, Filippo, because you're Brazilian as well. I think that's the sad. See R9. See, you can't put R9.
I know R9 as a legend of the game. Everyone knows that. Everyone agrees. But I would argue he's more of an Inter legend than a Milan legend.
He's a bigger Barca legend than he is a Milan legend.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like it's not. I don't.
Some of these are the names. They got to throw it in there just in case you forgot that they played for Milan. They put it on their website.
Van Basten, obviously, that one is more than deserved. Kaká again, but then you have Ronaldinho here, and I was even going to ask about Zlatan too. I think Zlatan has done a lot for Milan, scored a lot of goals. I think 90 goals or 80 something, 1-2 Serie A Scudetto. But he also played for the rivals. He also didn't stay there for long enough, in my opinion. But apparently he is.
Him and Baggio are very similar like that.
But would you say he is a Milan legend, Ibra?
I think he has the most unique case out of any Milan player that I could think of. His time at Milan and his stints were very short, but the times in which he arrived, the club was kind of on the back end of winning. In 2011, when they won that title, he came from Barca. Obviously, he's been their best striker since then. And then when he came back, he was really that kind of like, I guess you could say, symbol of when the club started to turn things around was people associate him when he came in January back from LA Galaxy, unlike Beckham, they started winning again. And he was a huge part of all these younger players like Rafael Leao, Teo Hernandez, Benacer, of all elevating their levels. They always gave him credit for that. So I think there's a special place in Milan's heart, even though he only won 2 Scudetti. They weighed a lot more for a lot of fans, especially number 19 when they won a couple years ago, because they were so terrible for so long. So I think the emotional connection with Zlatan is far greater than some players who accomplished a lot more as players for Milan.
Marco,
I agree. That last one was crazy. The last Scudetto that Milan had won just a couple of years ago. I know Milan went through like that really dark period, but the one that they won where Inter was a much better team just in 2021, 2022. And Zlatan even called it. He said, I will come back to this team and I'm going to make you win a Scudetto. And it sounded crazy. Like to anyone who was watching the league week in and week out, and Martino, Milan fans went through such a pain period. And Zlatan said, I'm going to win with, Brahim Diaz and a bunch of just like random players that nobody had known at the time. You thought he was crazy. And he gave that little bit of edge, like Martino was mentioning, to players who had a lot of talent, like Leao, who he says in training, I used to have to watch him. I used to have to tell him that he needs to train a lot harder. And he made that team achieve something that no one could have guessed. So for me, I would put Ibra in a Milan legend. And I think a lot of the younger fans, they can't connect to a lot of the players on this list, but Ibra would be one of those that if you're a younger Milan fan, you're going to be attracted towards Milan because of him.
So it's interesting that you two brought up this point. So I guess like for being a legend, sometimes specific cases can alter the stats or something. You can ignore something like a stat that he might be lacking for other reasons.
Sure.
I guess Zlatan, what he accomplished with a weaker side and a little bit of his aura too, that always helps a bit. I guess David Beckham made it all on aura too to that list. But it's interesting because what you guys are saying here is there is a legends list in the website, which seems like they more or less just tried to list any soccer legend that played for Milan.
Yes.
And then there are actual Milan legends. And when I say Pulisic become a Milan legend, I mean like literally a Milan legend, not like David Beckham was put in the list, right? Because Pulisic could become an iconic player on his own if the U.S. just accomplishes something crazy in the World Cup, right? Just becomes a legend of the sport just because of that, because it's so unique, right? And then what I want to get to here is because we want to determine if it's even possible for Pulisic to make the list of some of these guys. And obviously you guys talked about the state of Milan these days. Back in the day, you would have to win a Champions League, win multiple trophies with Milan to become a legend. And you just talked about Zlatan, how he pretty much got in that category because he was able to pull off a Scudetto with Milan, which that these days it's a much bigger accomplishment than it was like in 2005, where Milan had a team that I'll even put up the lineup later. It was an incredible team. So I'm going to list a few things here that usually define a legend of the club. And then I just want to get from you guys a yes or no, more or less like, yes, this is something that is important or not. And then we'll eliminate it. So let me actually put it on screen. That way you guys can see it and tell me what works or what doesn't. So essentially it's this. Does the amount of games played for a club determine if he's a legend or not?
Again, that depends on era, right? Because like Maldini had like hundreds and hundreds of appearances on the best teams ever. But you know, if you're, I don't know, Jack Bonaventura, who was a really good player for Milan in the 2010s, he got a bunch of games played for them, but I don't think he comes close to like sniffing that. I think games played is all relative to the teams you play for. Like if you're cracking in like the mid 2000s teams and you're playing a lot of games for them and you're involved in those, I think that could be constituted as such. But like his backup right now, I guess, is Musa on the right wing if he doesn't trust Chukwueze. So no disrespect to Christian with the games played, but it's still a huge boost for him. I think it still matters for sure.
Marco?
I would say, yeah. I would say, yeah, it definitely matters. Also doing it consistently and doing it over a certain length of time. Absolutely. And there's probably levels to it. Like you just mentioned, Maldini. I mean, you could lose track of the amount of games that he's played, but then we just made the argument for Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who even when he joined Milan in the last stint, we'd still consider him in that category. So it matters. And I think if he would stay at Milan, even past this season, you know, there's always the rumors of what can happen next year and if he's going to move on to another team. If he would stay on, then it certainly helps his case. So, yeah, I would say it matters.
Okay. So with that said, saying that matters, it's pretty clear to me Pulisic's not Zlatan and not at the level of Zlatan. I don't think he ever will be that level. So Pulisic probably, if he wants to become a Milan legend, I would say he has to stay at least another 4 seasons with Milan. At least, maybe more. And playing, right? Like obviously not like 3 seasons become a backup, like playing. Goals and assists. And we're going to go through his stats very soon. I think you are going to say that, yes, goals and assists matter, especially for a forward, right?
Yes. Definitely. And it's been odd because he is the best penalty taker on the team, but they've had too many issues sorting that out and giving him his opportunities. I think it was on Teo's birthday against Fiorentina. But I mean, just
twice.
Also like as a winger too, because I get in a lot of spats with people who don't think Christian is the best American player of all time, because I think he is. And they always are citing like Clint Dempsey's goals, and Clint was great, but Clint was playing a lot closer to goal. Christian is playing as a 10 right now, de facto, and he's also a wide player as a right winger. So to actually get goals at that position is even more difficult, but he's doing both. And I think what is the statistic that we always show is that since he's joined Milan in Serie A, he's in like the top 4 for goal contributions for a player. So he's been one of the best players in the league for sure. And if he sustains that, it's really just coming down to, you know, the third thing right there on the list.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through stats in a second here. Trophies, I think it's pretty obvious, but I wanted to ask you guys this real quick before we move on, because he has no trophies with Milan yet. In the past, like the standard were like Champions League, Scudetto. Do you think if he wins one Scudetto in like, let's say he stays in Milan for 5 to 6 seasons, would that be enough? Like one?
I don't think so.
I
I'll preface it with it depends. You know, if he would score it, if he scores in an iconic way and absolutely lifts the teams. I think the biggest category here would be like memories. Like if you leave a lasting memory on a Milan fan and you were that impactful, that's how you break into the category of being a legend. And even when I asked like the older generation, a couple of Milan fans that are with me, even yesterday, I said, guys, would you put Pulisic as a Milan legend? Like, oh no, but they're holding it to a different standard, right? They're talking about their legends are Van Basten and Maldini and all those other ones that we looked at. And they said if he stays here for long and can drag us to win titles, he certainly can make a case for it. But you got to leave lasting impressions, like scoring in the derby, scoring in Champions League matches. Those are the ones that will make the young Milan fans put you in that category of being a legend.
Okay, so you pretty much answered the second one. It's trophies combined with iconic moments, and it's interesting that you
Yes.
bring that up because there's one thing USMNT fans can all relate to, is for example, Martino was talking about how some people debate on whether Pulisic was better than Lyndon Donovan. To me, it's pretty crystal clear that he's a better player than Donovan ever was. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
But Landon had so many iconic moments with the United States that people get attached to that, like the Algeria goal in the World Cup, like some moments that are like
I know,
Hollywood.
yeah, it was a spill tap in him.
It becomes hard for you to say, no, that's my hero. Pulisic's not better than him until Pulisic does something similar. Even though you look at the underlying stats, you look just how Pulisic plays, his accomplishments for club, and you're like, this is clearly a better player than Donovan ever was. But Donovan has all those iconic moments. So you still see a lot of fans that are probably 25 and older, not the younger ones, but older, that will just go, no, it's Landon to me. Pulisic still has a lot to prove. But going on from that, the other one I put here was charisma, which would be like aura and stuff. And then we mentioned like Zlatan, let's be real, that plays a role too. The guy just like, he just screams legend everywhere he goes, even though he hasn't succeeded in every single
He'll
cup.
let you know it. Yeah.
But here's the good. Go ahead. Sorry.
He mentioned it, I think, in the documentary that you guys came out with, Marco, about Christian's personality and his charisma and how he was talking about Captain America. And I know Christian doesn't like the nickname from what I understand, but he's just talking about like, if you're this great and you're this sort of symbol of a generation for a player, like put your foot down a little bit more, like make your presence be known about that. And I've heard like different things in training out there in Milan. And I know you guys have discussed that a little bit on Paramount. On how he might not like how certain players train. I'm not going to speak on names with that, but I think it's just his presence. I think what was the biggest moment technically when we saw that he completed an interview in Italian and it was such a big deal because everybody was so surprised by it. I think just assimilating yourself within the culture as well and making Milan fans love you some more, because I think a lot of Italian Milan fans were very skeptical of who he was. When we got him, for me, it's a huge deal because to me, this is the most talented player that America has ever produced, or the best one that I've seen. And to kind of get somebody like that with Milan being from this area, it was huge. But again, it's just he's more of a reserved, quiet guy, and that's okay. But when you're like that, you kind of have to increase the iconic moments and then trophies, even though I think trophies is completely out of his hand for the most part.
Yeah.
There's like a charm to that though, right? Because I get everybody always says that about Christian, but it's kind of like what everyone wants their kids to be, right? They're like, prove it on the pitch. Forget about talking. Forget about that. And there's definitely different players do different things. Like you mentioned, Zlatan, he's got that presence. He's always going to be him. Andrea Pirlo was not somebody that's going to shout on the field, but he was going to do it with a beautiful pass. Gennaro Gattuso was going to tackle you, and he would scream at his players. So everybody's different. But I think one of the things that I really like about Christian, and I think Martino, you just mentioned it, that I think he did really well, is he feels like he assimilated so well in Italy. And like they kind of like that about him. He always talks about how beautiful the country is and how he feels calm in a place and that he just feels good as a person. And that's what's letting him translate on the pitch. I think that is a sense of charisma, and might not be the textbook definition of what that means, but I think he's earned a lot of points within Italy for the way that he does act.
It's interesting because when you think of, the U.S. is a huge country and we have peoples from all personalities. But when you think of like American athlete or American, that how they think of us abroad very often, they think more of like a Zlatan personality, very arrogant, like I'm the best. And I mean, he backs it obviously, but Pulisic's not really what they think. It's like, hey, he's very quiet, humble. He just wants to do his work, just wants to get it done. and he doesn't seem to like the spotlight, even though I think he probably should. But question to you guys, the last one here before we go through Pulisic stats and we can determine if it's realistic for him to become a legend or not. Does national team success while being a Milan player play a role? Like, let's say he keeps doing what he's doing for Milan, and the U.S. makes an incredible quarterfinals run in the World Cup, eliminates, I don't know, like a big national team in England, Argentina, something crazy happens in the world. I'm not even saying semifinals. That seems like a stretch, but quarterfinals with the right luck, bracket, doesn't seem too crazy at home, especially now with the real coach. So would a national team success play any role into this?
Marco, you can go first.
I might be unpopular, but I would say no. I really don't think that Milan fans are going to care that much. And I mean, being Italian, Shevchenko is some Milan fans' favorite player of all time, right? And you don't just judge him for what he's done there. Maybe it could always trickle down. It could always play in the back of your mind. But for me, at the end of the day, the diehard Milan fans, they only remember what you did in a Milan jersey. Those are the ones that are going to leave the lasting memories, the lasting impressions. Maybe if there's a hybrid of a fan who really loves the USA and they love Milan at the same time. But if you're talking about, a random Italian guy in the middle of Milano, I don't think he's really going to care about what Pulisic does. He'll be happy, but at the end of the day, it's not going to play. For me, it doesn't play a factor if he becomes a Milan legend or not. And if he was Italian, I don't think it would make much of a difference.
Yeah, because again, like sitting there, like Teo Hernandez made a World Cup final. It really, like, no one talks about that for Milan, right? Like, that's not something.
It's also French too, and
yeah,
French
well,
and
yeah,
Italian rivalry.
French 100% does not help. Same goes for Magnan, but I would just say that, like, I think anything and everything that matters for Christian and becoming a legend in any manner would be him doing something in a Milan shirt. Because again, as successful as a club as we are, if you really look at the turn of the century, they only have 3 league titles. It's really not that impressive. We're further behind Inter and Juve in that regard, and we haven't been to a Champions League final and even won it in 17 years. It's going to be 18 years because they're not doing it this year. That would be stunning. So, like, okay, put it this way, right? If Milan were to somehow magically win the Champions League this year and Pulisic is a protagonist in that, he's a Milan legend.
Tomorrow, he's a legend.
Tomorrow, he's a legend. There's no denying it, because just, like, let alone for, like, Milan winning a Champions League for the first time in a while, just an Italian team winning it. It's going to be, 15 years now since Inter did the treble. So I think that's a seismic moment. I think a Scudetto, it wouldn't just be enough. I think Zlatan, just real quick, if he didn't ever come back to Milan after that first time, I don't think anyone classifies him as a legend, because he came in late from Barca. He only had 14 goals a year. They won the title. His second year was the crazy year where Juve went undefeated and won. He had 28 goals that season, and he was incredible. But he left immediately after. Same kind of goes for Thiago Silva. Thiago Silva was great for Milan. He never came back. He never did anything after that. So I don't think people classify him as one. He's just more of that bigger what if. But Pulisic has to win multiple trophies, and I feel bad because I don't think this ownership group and this management are gonna do their best efforts to put Milan in that position to win.
Okay. Filippo, do you disagree with the last one?
The national team, in part, I'll tell you what I disagree with. For example, the example of Teo Hernandez. I think the difference is Teo Hernandez, many people don't even remember he was with the French team in general. While the United States nowadays, I would argue most soccer fans in the world, they only know like Pulisic in the national team and maybe a player here and there. You go to, like, I go to Brazil and talk to my friends there. United States, which players do you know? They only say Pulisic now. One or another that follows the game closer to go. Oh, McKennie plays for or Weah, the son of George Weah. They'll say things like that. But no fan, like, really, like Anthony Robinson, for example, great left back. You talk to a Brazilian about him, he's like, he's American. The Fulham guy, they don't even know, right? Tyler Adams, great player. They don't even know. So I think that there's a difference between what the U.S. accomplishes in France in terms of like Christian Pulisic, because he will be the face of that team. If the team goes down, a lot will fall on him. If the team goes well, a lot will also fall on him, for the better, for the worse. And I do think there's also a difference between the U.S. or France doing well in a World Cup, right? France, like these days, we're expecting them to make it to a final. We're expecting them to go for the trophy. The United States, if I go to any random fan and say, hey, group stage exit or semifinals run, I'd say 90% say, oh, you're getting grouped. They're going to say something like that, even though we're not going to get it home, I hope. But I think depending on the circumstances and what the U.S. does in the World Cup and maybe who Pulisic helps knock out, something like that could change the tune.
Not if he knocks out Italy. I'll let you know right now.
Yeah,
if he knocks out Italy, he can win the whole thing, and they won't
what
give
about
it to him.
France? You said they hate France.
We gotta make
kidding,
it first. We gotta make it first.
I think what the point I'm getting to here is, I think if the player becomes a legend of the sport, there will be a predisposed bias of fans labeling him a legend of their own club.
Yeah,
so I think
we saw on the website.
Yeah, like the website a little bit. But what I would say is, if he becomes a legend of the sport through the national team, I think he'll need to accomplish a little bit less with Milan for them to push him there. Not everything. He still has to do everything you guys said, but I do think, like, let's say you guys go on and say he needs 3 Scudettos to get that. Okay, maybe if he's already a legend of the sport, 2 will cut it. Like okay, because
Gotcha.
Honestly, like the way the past 15 years or so have gone, if they get 2 within a short span of what his career is here, and a lot of Milan fans think I accept this standard. I don't. I think they should be aiming higher, but they haven't won back-to-back league titles in like 30 years. It's been a very long time. So if he were to even pull off something like that, as also getting the 2nd star, for example, too, is a huge thing. Because we're going to be the 3rd club to do that. Hopefully, I don't think it'll be that long, but that stuff matters. And it's funny too, by the way, just because of legacy, people just always forget his Champions League run with Chelsea the year they won it. Like he had massive impact and goal contributions against Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, and somehow that just gets lost upon people. Like we're talking about an American being a major protagonist for a Champions League winner, and nobody wants to bring it up because I guess it was during lockdown, so not the same sort of like feelings and emotions involved with it, and kind of the whole narrative behind him at Chelsea. But like he's proven on the major stages that he belongs and he can accomplish these things.
Yeah, I think that it's because of what happened after with Chelsea, right? Like all the injuries, playing out of position. So people just forgot that run with that Chelsea team under Thomas Tuchel. But yeah, I guess like the whole legend thing, and we can go through like Pulisic right now to close the video in pretty much saying, what are the odds of him becoming a legend or not of Milan? I know there's many variables, and this video can age very well or very poorly, 4 to 5 years. But so far, it's been 1 season and a half, and he's currently injured as we're recording this, so nothing's going to change until January when he's back. He's played 70 games total for Milan in 1.5 seasons. I'd say that's a good amount. If he keeps up at this rate, he'll close the season probably with 85 to 90 total, which means in 2 seasons, it's that means if he stays for 4 to 5 seasons, he'll easily break like maybe 250 to 300 caps. I'd say that's pretty good, right? That'll be a decent number for him to go. Goals and assists. He has 23 goals and 17 assists, so he has 40 goal contributions. At this rate, let's say he finishes with 50. That's 25 each season. Multiply that by 4, he'll have over 100 goal contributions by 4 to 5 seasons from now. And one thing I will say is I put this down. Pulisic will have 75 to 80 goals for Milan if he stays for 4 to 5 seasons, which would put him on a top 15 of all time for Milan, which is no easy accomplishment, especially because he's not there for too long. And if he stays healthy, he would even surpass Zlatan and George Weah with those numbers. Zlatan is at like 88 or something. And I know you guys gave the overall context of how Zlatan made there, and it's not made it to that list, and it's not really just the goals he scored. But George Weah is a big deal too, like Ballon d'Or winner, legend of the sport, Milan legend, father of Pulisic's friend, Tim Weah. Trophies, Pulisic has 0 so far with Milan, and we kind of addressed that already. Has to win maybe 1 or 2 Scudettos. Iconic moments, maybe a trophy that is achievable for Milan could be the Italian Cup. And if he maybe wins the Italian Cup, beating Inter Milan in the final, Pulisic scoring, I think moments like that were what you guys were talking about.
It would be big real quick because they're historically awful in Coppa Italia. They've won it 1 time since like the Reagan administration. They've been terrible. It's bad. It's bad. Like I was 8 years old, 9 years old when they last won it, 03, 04, maybe something like that. So no, that was the Scudetto. So I think 2005. I think it would be a big moment. I think that goal in the derby against Inter after losing to them so many times and getting embarrassed by them, that's probably his most iconic moment because the goal was great, very similar to the one he scored against Liverpool as well. So I think that's probably his biggest moment. That match against Lazio last year was great. That was one of the more chaotic ones.
Yeah, and that's why I put it there. The brawl, and then he did score an Olympico in the Champions League. I know it's not a moment that people will talk about forever, but only 4 players in the history have done that in the Champions League, and he's the first Milan player to do so. So I think it is something that adds value. But my overall conclusion here, when looking towards this, and the whole discussion we had, is I think it's not impossible for him to become a Milan legend. But when we look at all of this so far and what he's accomplished, he is really, really, really far, very far. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that, but it looks like the goal contributions, honestly, and the games played are what he seems to be the closest. Because if he just keeps this rate, he'll be there up with most of them. But trophies, he could very well end 5 seasons with no trophies. That can very well happen.
Yeah,
iconic moments, those, like, he hasn't really had one crazy one so far. 0 so far. Charisma, he's not going to change. Let's be real. He's not going to be this guy like Zlatan. That's not going to change. And the national team success, I think it could contribute, like I already explained.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't accomplish anything else with Milan that big, it won't matter. Let's be real. But let's start with you, Marco, actually. Would you say it's realistic for him to become a Milan legend, or it's just crazy talk right now?
You know what's weird about Milan? And I'm realizing this now that we record this video, the level, the expectations that they're held by the fans, by like especially old school fans, and then the reality of where the team really is in the recent past is very far apart. You know what I'm saying? Like Milan fans hold themselves to such a high standard. And like I said, the old school fans, what are they going to tell you? They're going to be like, you got to win us a Champions League. That's how you become a legend. But then when you talk about the truth, the facts, the reality is, you guys even mentioned it, winning a Scudetto, winning Coppa Italia, scoring important goals. Those are the realistic things that maybe you can expect unless something crazy happens. And we saw Milan go to a Champions League semifinal, but were they the top 4 team in the world? No, I don't think anybody would argue that they are. One other moment, too, just to add on, is that Liverpool goal. I know that the result doesn't go his way, and a lot of these things are determined by his team and by the help that he gets with the rest of the squad. But that Liverpool goal is one that I always hear fans talk about because it was him dragging the team. It was like, come on, boys, like we could do this. That's what you got to do. If he can do that, it sounds crazy. When you texted me this and said, this is what we're going to record a video on, I was like, oh boy, I don't know how I'm going to even find any arguments. But slowly you started to sell me that, you know, if things go well, and especially if he decides to stay at Milan and keeps talking about Milan the way that he has, and he keeps talking about Italy the way that he has, those are all things that are going to go in his favor. And maybe it's not as crazy as I initially thought.
What percentage would you give it?
I'm
going to tell you mine, and you can piggyback right on that one if you want. I would say there's somewhere between a 5 to 10% chance it can happen. And the bare minimum that has to happen, the bare minimum, he has to stay there for, not counting this season, another 4 seasons and continue the same productivity to the bare minimum. If he does that, I would say it's more towards the 10% because, again, it's going to come down to iconic moments. It's going to come down to trophies. Some things might be out of his control, like the trophies.
Yeah.
He can't win the Scudetto on his own. But I'm giving it somewhere between a 5 to 10%, which, again, for an American player with one of the biggest clubs of all time, I think that's unheard of.
I was going to go higher. Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself and getting excited by all this. Also, the way that things have shaped up, it's been a lot better than I could have ever expected. So maybe there's something beautiful.
I convinced you.
Yeah, maybe it's that. I was going to give 20%. Okay. Something felt right about that number to me. And again, you got to feel momentum. You got to see how things have been going. And so far, it's worked out better than I could have expected. So maybe, something could switch and things can fall into place because it will be something special. If you do it at a club like Milan, you live on in history. I don't care where the club is now, where the club is in the recent past. If you could do it at a club like Milan, it means more than doing it elsewhere.
Martino.
I don't like ownership to put them in a position to win anything. I think it's not his fault, unfortunately. And also, like, trophy count too. Like, if you really look at Kaká, for example, my favorite player ever, they didn't win that much trophy-wise. Like, if you really, like, stack it up, major trophies, he had 1 league title, 1 Champions League. If you want to do FIFA Club World Cup and the Coppa Italia, that's not that many trophies, right? In the grand scheme of things, if you look at Milan's history. They have one of the worst defenses I've ever seen Milan have. And they're not going to put him in a position to win. And I think that's the most damning thing. Maybe that changes. Hopefully that changes within the next 2 to 3 years. And if he does keep that level of productivity and he wins one Scudetto and like maybe a Coppa Italia, I think he gets there, because I think having, hopefully at that point, the most iconic US men's national team player to ever exist and be successful at a club like Milan, I think that makes you a Milan legend. And I think a lot of, and the funny thing is too, once Milan, if they can end up winning something, they're going to adore him for it, especially if he's a protagonist, because he has been the most consistent of players since he has arrived. Leao gets more slack for the stuff he's been doing. Teo, some of these other players that might be held to higher standards, but Christian is exceeding every expectation. And that way, I think he's going to be revered by Milan fans, because he's actually doing everything that's asked of him. Because even if he's not scoring, he's still putting in great effort on a consistent basis, something that's been critiqued of Leao and Teo Hernandez. I think if Christian goes along that path and he keeps contributing like you're saying, and our owners stop being the way they are, then yeah, but I would still say it's like 10% only because of ownership and management, not because of the player. The only way I see it going negatively for the player is if he gets injured constantly again. That's it. I think Serie A, he's very good for this level. I think he's phenomenal. And yeah, so I think he's got a shot if the club aligns with, what they should be like.
Okay,
That's a
so
different story.
at the end of the day, it looks like it's not that crazy. It's far.
No,
It's not going to be easy. And like even Marco said, Marco gave a 20% chance, which I even think it's high, but 20% still means it's more likely that he will not become. So by a lot. Before you guys go, I just want to show you one thing. Look at this Milan starting 11 back in the 2023-2024 season.
Oh my gosh.
This is what Milan used to be. For anyone that's like maybe, I don't know, like 15, 18, 20 even, watching this video right now, when we talk about the biggest clubs of all time, Milan, look at this starting 11. It's not even crazy to say all 11, even the coach, all 12 in this picture right here, they're all legends of the sport in general. Maybe Costa Curta might not be a legend of the sport, but definitely a Milan legend. Rui Costa might not also be a legend of the sport, but outside of those two, these are all legendary players and the legendary coach that they had. Look at that.
This is like what a troll football posts when they have no content, when stuff is slow. Like, oh, remember the iconic Milan 11. That's amazing. It's what made, I'm sure Martino fell in love with Milan because of some of these players, no?
Yeah, of course, bro. I mean, listen.
Who's your guy?
Who's my guy is it's different.
You got to pick one.
God, that's not fair.
Only one.
It's between two. It's between Gattuso and Kaká. Gattuso, because he's very similar skill-wise to how I am, and it's not very good technical ability, but all heart and fight. But Kaká is just, I think if you talk to people who became fans of Milan around that era, Kaká is everything. Because he was just so unique. I don't think we'll ever see a number 10 like him again. I hope we do, because he was incredible. But for me, Kaká is just he's just an icon. He's my favorite. So,
and Kaká, when we talked about charisma and personality, he's more towards like a Christian Pulisic personality than a Zlatan or Ronaldinho, or
literally because he's Christian. Yeah.
Well, but he's just like super like reserved.
The I Love Jesus picture, bro, right? After they won.
So does Neymar. Neymar had the I Love Jesus like little band here, and I mean,
the Neymar's a totally different personality when it comes to charisma,
we played soccer with Kaká here, pickup soccer here in Orlando.
Did you ask him to cut it back or no?
No, I'm better. No, I locked him down.
Martino's got a couple of jokes,
bro,
feeling himself.
That's one of the. Is that not one of the funniest videos you ever seen when the guy asked Kaká to cut it? Sorry.
No, but
Kaká,
just like he doesn't really behave like a celebrity when you're around. He just came in, he was like carrying water bottles for everyone, and just like another guy with us. And we're just like, dude, you're a Ballon d'Or winner. You won a World Cup of Brazil when you were 18, sure on the bench, but you were there. A Milan legend, São Paulo legend, Orlando City legend for whatever that's worth too. And the dude is just like, it's very different from other players. Sometimes I mean, there are plenty of players that are far less accomplished than Kaká. We can make a long list of that, and you'll meet them and they behave like celebrities. It's quite clear. And then you get a guy like Kaká, completely different, which would be something much closer to a Christian Pulisic in terms of personality, that we would say much more like reserved and just like, hey, let me just show you guys what I can do here on the field. rather than just run my mouth everywhere, even though people like.
That's what we love about him. That's what I'm saying about like the whole charm and charisma things. Like I kind of love that type of play. Like I mentioned before, Kaká was one of the players that I fell in love with the sport because of Kaká, and it's because every week he did it on the pitch. He didn't have to respond by speaking, by talking, by acting all macho. No, at the end of the day, the ball doesn't lie. That's the oldest rule in the book in football. You do it on the pitch. Doesn't matter what you say. But it is true that there's some players that weren't as good, but because they're so talked about, because the media talked about them, you hold them to this higher standard, whereas others are not. So I'm in agreement in that sense.
And everyone, thank you very much for watching. Everyone watching this video, drop a comment down below if you guys think anything we said was nonsense. Can Christian Pulisic become a Milan legend or not? And listen, this video is not sponsored by Paramount Plus or CBS, but I will mention that there is a documentary on Christian Pulisic on Paramount Plus right now that Marco's even in it, and you guys should go watch it. Since you're watching this video, probably a Christian Pulisic fan, probably a Milan fan, and even if you're not, if you're just a soccer fan, go watch it. But once again, this is not a paid promotion, just to make that clear. And great job, by the way, with it, Marco and Martino. You have also your Milan channel, you have your social media page. Everyone go follow them. And you also have Italian Football TV. Marco has that on YouTube. I'm going to be putting everything in the description. Before I go, Martino, anything you want to add?
No, just thank you for having me on. I'm very curious to hear, Marco, if you're going to ask Antonio what he thinks about this question, if that ever pops up. You did?
I did.
It wasn't on the podcast yesterday. But
no.
Is it recorded or no?
It's not recorded. Actually, I'll re-ask it. Recorded. He's obsessed with Christian Pulisic. He also does. There's one other thing, probably the last piece of context that we didn't add into this. If you're an Italian American, he really does. He's like a perfect blend for you. Like Antonio, he's an Italian and he's an American immigrant from Italy, but he feels so connected to America as a country because of the opportunity. And then for him to see an American player represent his club and also be that important, he is biased and he loves him, but. For his generation, for that generation, you have to win a Champions League in his eyes to ever become a legend. But as we explained through this video, Filippo, you did it well. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
Antonio's a different animal when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
He's totally different. Yeah.
But thank you very much for watching, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.